Next, First Lady Hilary Clinton and Housing and Urban Development Secretary Henry Cisneros. During a forum yesterday, they discussed a community empowerment banking initiative that'll provide $20 million in grants and loan guarantees to help revitalize poor communities. They're joined by Assistant Housing Secretary Andrew Cuomo and representatives of the 3 communities receiving the initial grants. The program's 1 hour.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for joining us here today. It's a treat to be here with the First Lady in this wonderful facility, the White Law Hotel. I want to thank Reverend Dickerson and those associated with MANA who have invested funding over the years in order to bring this facility back, a great turn-of-the-century facility which is now once again serving the community. Reverend, thank you very much, and to all of the MANA folks. Let's say thank you for their work. I want to acknowledge also the presence today of the Mayor of the District of Columbia, Mayor Marion Barry. Mayor, thank you very much for joining us here today. Delegate Eleanor Holmes Norton. Delegate, thank you very much for your wonderful work always. Agnes Welch is the Vice President of the Baltimore City Council. She's here representing Mayor Kurt Schmoke. Thank you very much for joining us. Carol Thompson Cole of the Office of Management and Budget, who's working on district matters. Carol, thank you very much for being here. And John Hamilton, one of the organizers of the new bank that we're here to announce today. John, thank you for your work. And thanks to all of the rest of you who have such an abiding interest in the nation's capital, in the District of Columbia. This is a very special day in many respects. It is a special day because today we're announcing an initiative that will create new credit opportunities for the people of the District of Columbia to bring jobs and community development to the district. But it's a special day also because so much is happening in the federal government these days to think through the relationship between the nation's government and the nation's capital. And perhaps, at least for me, one of the most special aspects of that is the interest that the First Lady of our country has taken in the nation's capital. Traditionally, First Ladies have thought of their responsibilities as essentially taking care of the White House. We're fortunate that today we have a First Lady who sees her responsibilities as reaching beyond the gates of the White House to the children and the families and the schools and the neighborhoods of this wonderful place, the nation's capital. And we should say thank you to her for her special interest in it. This is a city that belongs to the people who live here, obviously, but also to the nation. It's set up in a special relationship, and as such, it needs to be treated in a special way. And the leadership that President Clinton is bringing to this subject, that the First Lady is bringing to this subject, is very important. There are some massive problems that need to be addressed, and no one can expect that those can be solved overnight. But a diligent, thoughtful approach, cooperating with the duly elected leadership, the mayor and the delegate of the district, with the home rule status of the district in a thoughtful way, with the kind of people-oriented compassion that the First Lady and the President bring to this effort, I think is exactly what needs to be done. And so in all of those ways, it's a special day, not to mention that we're a few days before Christmas and have some announcements to make today as well. Today, I'm pleased to announce that the Department of Housing and Urban Development is creating the first ever investment to create 3 community empowerment banks. We're awarding some $8.5 million in grants and $11.5 million in loan guarantees to 3 community development banks, the first that HUD will ever do, in 3 communities, in the District of Columbia, in Baltimore, and in rural Mississippi. And in a little while, we'll have representatives of those communities join us for a little round-robin discussion about what these kinds of community banks mean. Before going any further, I want to acknowledge the key person on the HUD team that has been responsible for putting this program together, and that's Assistant Secretary Andrew Cuomo. Andrew, would you please stand and let us recognize you for your work? Community empowerment banks, like those that are being announced today, are making a substantial difference in revitalizing distressed communities. And they build directly on President Clinton's commitment to give all Americans a chance to participate in the benefits of the strong economy that his decisions have helped create. These banks serve two very vital functions. The first is they help fill the community credit gap, providing people access to capital that they need to start businesses or to purchase businesses or to fix up homes or to climb their way out of poverty. Too often, as we know, residents and small business owners in low-income neighborhoods face overwhelming obstacles as credit from commercial institutions in the standard practice of business is just not available. The President has always felt strongly about this. He worked on this as governor in Arkansas and has always stressed it as president. This is the first effort to do this in this way in the District of Columbia. Second, and what is especially unique about this community empowerment initiative, is that these banks will offer low-cost ownership shares in the bank to community residents. That means people can buy into the bank and invest in the community's long-term well-being. That means a kind of personal stake in the bank that has multiple benefits. It generates community commitment to the bank, it raises additional capital for the bank, and it ensures that a significant measure of control over the bank's destiny and strategy is in the hands of people who have the greatest stake of all, those who live in the neighborhoods in the community. This, in brief, is how it works. For each of these three banks, HUD provides the initial seed capital, about $3 million in grants and loans to Baltimore's bank, about $8.5 million to Washington's bank, and the same amount, about $8.5 to the rural Mississippi bank. The local guarantees then use the federal funds to leverage private and other public investment. The $8.5 million HUD investment in Washington's bank, for example, is expected to leverage about $85 million in investments from private and public sources. So this is a very substantial business that has the potential to come into being. These lending institutions are significant, not just for the positive impact they will have in these communities, because they foster our most basic values of community and opportunity and wealth creation and responsibility and integrating poor neighborhoods into the larger mainstream economy. We're all deeply pleased to have our First Lady here today. It's fitting that she would be here because she's been a champion of such community-based concepts virtually all her life, and has a first-hand knowledge of micro-enterprise banks, small banks lending in the community for small enterprises in Arkansas, but also has watched these things in Asia and in Latin America. I'm very pleased to be able to introduce the most special First Lady I think our country has ever had, and who understands neighborhoods and communities as no First Lady we've ever had. And it is a special treat for me to introduce at this time the First Lady of our country, who will bring her special touch of compassion and eye-to-eye contact with children and understanding of families to this special city of our country, the nation's capital of Washington, D.C. Please join me in welcoming our First Lady, Hilary Clinton.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Henry Cisneros has been an extraordinary leader for a long time, but the leadership that he's given to HUD, I think, is unparalleled in our history. And we are so grateful for what you have done and the example you have set and the progress that has been made under your stewardship at HUD. And we're going to miss you being there very much. I'm also delighted to be here with the mayor and with Eleanor Holmes Norton and with Secretary Cuomo and so many of you who are part of this very important effort. I think celebrating the creation of this Community First Bank here in Washington and also having representatives of the other banks from Baltimore and Mississippi is one of the best ways we could move into the Christmas season, because this effort will change people's lives. And I'm pleased that we are announcing this first ever HUD effort here in our nation's capital. Because as Secretary Cisneros has just said, this is not just a city for our country, this is a city for the world. This is the city where the seat of government of the United States fulfills its responsibilities at home and abroad. And we know that we have unique and difficult challenges facing the men, women, and children who live and work in our nation's capital. And much has been written and debated about what is wrong with Washington and what isn't working. And all of us will do our part to meet those challenges. But let's not forget about everything that is right about Washington and the people who live here and the people who work here every single day. This is a unique place to live, work, and do business. Not only is it the capital city, it is a mecca for tourists. It is a leading center for biotechnology and medical research. It is a nerve center for international communications. It is a place filled with people working hard to bring greater prosperity and progress to themselves, to the city, and to the country. And after all, people are the most important resource of any enterprise, and that's particularly true of this great city. The Community First Bank of Washington, D.C. is but one indication of the energy and vision at work here. This unique partnership between the federal government, private businesses, and neighborhood residents will bring credit, jobs, and economic independence to people who are willing to work hard and take responsibility. This bank has the power to transform the lives not only of its loan recipients, but of entire families, neighborhoods, and communities. I know this because I have seen firsthand over the last 11 or 12 years now what these community bank efforts can mean. I have seen it in Bangladesh, I have seen it in India, in Nicaragua, in Chile, in Bolivia, and I have seen it in our own country. I have seen how loans as small as $25 or $100 can absolutely empower men and women to lift their families out of poverty and to make their villages or their neighborhoods better places to live. I have stood in some of the poorest places in the world, villages that have weathered civil wars and earthquakes, devastated urban neighborhoods. And I have listened as people have told me how their lives had changed from destitution to inspiration because a community bank had given them the opportunity to start or expand a small business, selling and sewing clothes, baking bread and pastries, weaving mosquito netting, buying another milk cow, buying a rickshaw, selling auto parts door to door. And I have heard these stories and I have listened and watched as people explained what it meant for them to have access to the tools of opportunity for the first time in their lives. I wish everyone here could have been with me at a discussion that I've had time and time again around the world. One in particular that I remember in Santiago, Chile. I met a seamstress who for years could barely make a living and certainly couldn't compete with the large clothing factories because the equipment she worked on was so outdated. She told me that she felt like she had all this potential and energy but was a trapped bird in a cage. But then getting a loan that enabled her to buy a high-speed sewing machine made her feel like a caged bird set free. I laughed, and then she added, I kissed that sewing machine over and over again, and now I have another one and a woman who works for me. My husband and I have been longtime believers in the potential of microcredit, micro-lending, micro-enterprise to transform communities. When he was governor of Arkansas, He started the Good Faith Fund in the rural area of that state, a small micro-lending project that was inspired by the Grameen Bank in Bangladesh, one of the most successful efforts of community banking in the world. Whether it's a sewing shop in D.C. or a diner here in D.C., whether it's a meatpacking company in Mississippi or it's some other enterprise in Baltimore, we know that the jobs that are being created, the income that is being generated, is creating new opportunities for everyone who comes into contact with the loan recipient. These businesses bring not only jobs and services, they give hope to people. They help reclaim neighborhoods. That small loan to a low-income citizen is a reliable catalyst for self-sufficiency. Unfortunately, microlending is still a little-known concept here in the United States, but we are working very hard to spread the word. For many citizens across our country, people who work hard but have little or no collateral, securing a loan to start a small business or buy a modest home is a distant dream. As one woman at Mi Casa, a micro-lending project in Denver, Colorado, told me, a lot of great ideas die in the parking lots of banks. Because when poor people show up, when working people show up to get a loan, oftentimes the amount they need is below the amount that the bank will even process because it is not worth their while to lend $500 or $1,000. Or maybe they don't see what I think can be seen, that energy and effort and commitment is the best collateral in the world. And so too often, our banks don't understand the potential of investing in a lot of the people and the neighborhoods that this bank will go to service. The Community Empowerment Banking Initiative that we are announcing today can change this situation. Whenever I go or talk with someone in these banks in Asia or Latin America or Africa, I'm amazed at the loan repayment rate. The loan repayment rate in Bangladesh for the Grameen Bank, which lends to the poorest of the poor people in the world, people with nothing other than a dream and the willingness to work hard, is about 98%. I was in Bolivia just a week or two ago at the Banco de Sol. It's a for-profit bank. Its loan repayment rate would be the envy of many commercial banks here in our own country and in this city. I want to commend Assistant HUD Secretary Andrew Cuomo for his hard work and leadership in shepherding this initiative and so many others during the last 4 years. This recognizes that community revitalization must begin with people, and it empowers local residents not only to start or expand businesses and buy their first homes, it also encourages them to own stock in the bank. This is part of returning assets to communities that have been stripped of them because of the changes in the global economy in the last couple of decades. You cannot expect people who have no access to assets to be able to build the kind of futures for themselves and their children that we want them to be able to build. So everyone in this city has a stake in the success of this bank. It's a true model of a community working together, and I know that this bank and the banks that will follow from here to Baltimore to the Mississippi Delta will all be a great testament to what the human spirit can accomplish when people work in partnership to lift each other up. And in this season of lifting one another up, we could not have a better example than what we will hear in a few minutes as we listen to the stories of the men and women who are gathered here who will tell all of us how they were lifted up because somebody believed in them and gave them a chance. So I want to thank Secretary Cisneros, Secretary Cuomo, and all of you for bringing this dream to fruition here in our nation's capital city.
Yes. Thank you very much, Mrs. Clinton. We're so proud of you as our First Lady, and your understanding of these questions in communities and what it will mean in this great city. If you'll hold your places, we're going to remove the podium and bring a table and then have some folks from Washington and Baltimore and Mississippi who are both recipients of community loans as well as the organizers of the banks to come forward, and we'll have a dialogue for the next little while. We're out of sequence here, but we'll figure it out. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I think we'll be underway. Let me begin, if I may, by introducing the people who are our panelists here, beginning with Tracy Moore, who is at the end of the way here. Tracy founded a company called City Wings 3 years ago here in the District of Columbia. It's a very popular place that has, get this, 14 kinds of buffalo wings. Very popular. But the problem is, as she grows and becomes more popular, the expenses seem to grow as well. She has to buy more kitchen equipment, more production equipment, and so she has had to engage in a quest for capital, and she's going to talk to us a little bit about today just how that process has worked for her. Diane Bell is the next person, and she is with Empower Baltimore Management Corporation. It's the nonprofit organization that was set up to manage the empowerment zone in Baltimore, and it has made placed about 275 people in jobs, but an understanding of the capital questions in the area. You know Assistant Secretary Cuomo. He heads that aspect of HUD, which involves our homeless programs, community development block grants, and our work in communities. And that's why this community banking initiative and the empowerment zones are in his area of work. Lloyd Smith is the next person, and Lloyd is the Executive Director and CEO of the Marshall Community Development Organization. It's DC's largest CDC with a wonderful reputation, as is his own reputation, stellar for community work over the years. Bonita Conwell is the next person, and Bonita is born and raised in Mound Bayou, Mississippi, and she began a meat market 13 years ago with one Chevrolet truck and a lot of determination. She drove 10 hours several times a month, providing displaced Southerners in Chicago with good home-cooked Southern meat. Mrs. Clinton may know something about the need for good Southern meats. As a native of Chicago who knows good Southern food as well. She had a good reputation for her business and a good credit rating, but was just unable to obtain the loans that she needed for her business to grow, and she'll share some of that experience with us today. Teresa Ann Annis, who is seated next to me, is the partner, a partner and owner in Techmark Corporation. It's a company that has worked in providing fire protection and life safety systems, to some of the largest businesses in Baltimore. including, nice client to have, Camden Yards and the Baltimore Gas and Electric Company. And she's now expanding to offer security access cards, fire alarm systems, closed-circuit television, long-range radio frequency, and other applications of technology. Wanda Woodward began her business called Handy Hands, a residential and commercial cleaning business, in 1987, and struggled by herself to make it work for almost 6 years. The business ceased operation for a while due to lack of, you guessed it, funding, credit, money, until she formed a new partnership and began to operate again. Handy Hands is working on purchasing additional equipment, handing more employees, and the results would be larger contracts and the tremendous growth of Handy Hands. Finally, Mark Manning. Mark Manning is Executive Director of the Delta Council, which is the operator of the Empowerment Zone, one of the 3 rural empowerment zones that President Clinton announced 2 years ago, this in the Delta of Mississippi. The counties that in many censuses are simply designated as the poorest counties in the United States, in the Mississippi Delta. And the work that he does there is very significant, and it's work related to farming issues and transportation, but a big part of it deals with the issues we're discussing here today, credit and commercial banking availability. Well, with that, let me just throw one question out on the table, and we'll start, I think, with Tracy, if we can. Tracy, if you could just describe this dilemma of having a good product and being capable of growing, but finding that you are boxed in by the unavailability of credit. And then if you would address your remarks to the First Lady, she might have a thought or two that she would want to exchange with you.
Well, one of the problems that we have encountered is that we do have a large customer base, but you know the expenses are high, and it has stunted our growth, so to speak. I mean, we did throw out at one time trying to open up another store, which we did too fast, and it's, you know, that's a part of trying to get back on track, and it's just a lot of growth, natural growth problems that we have encountered, that if we had enough funding, we could have had a little cushion to, you know, kind of hold on a little easier.
The business is doing well.
Yeah, the business is.
How many people do you employ?
7.
7. Mm-hmm. And the product is a good product, so expansion is logical. I mean, it's possible.
Right.
But what do the banks tell you?
Well, we had one encounter with the bank, and it lasted probably 7 months, close to a year. And we were denied the loan at the end of that 7 months. So we've been kind of leery of banking. You know, we just hadn't even tried anymore. So.
Have you gotten any advice from anyone else concerning your business and some of the help you need? Because one of my hopes is that with this bank, it's not going to be just a place where you go and you ask for a loan, you either get it or you don't. You also get some support and some encouragement and some technical assistance as well, so that the decisions you face as a business owner, you're not there all by yourself. You've got some backup.
Well, no, I mean, people give advice, but sometimes just over time you realize the mistakes that you made anyway, and some of the advice that they give you, you've
been there. You know, one of the other benefits of the community banking initiative is everybody has a stake in the success of everybody else's business. I mean, if all of the people who are shareholders in the business are also taking out loans and repaying loans at the same time, I've seen this happen all over the world, then all of a sudden it's in my interest, if I'm also a shareholder, to come to your restaurant. Because the more you succeed, the better off I am. And that's a way to rebuild, you know, the kind of community base where businesses are supported.
Benita, tell us a little bit about your business. You went from moving Southern cooking to Chicago, and how you describe the business today, and then what you would do if you had the capital to expand.
Well, I began with just as she said, many banks telling me no, 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 and I was determined, and the only thing that I saw I could do was travel from the south to the north to try to find clientele. And what I did was bought me a smoker, and I smoked meat, and I put it in a vacuum sealed package, and I commuted it from the south to the north, and I did well. Okay, and after doing so, there were people always coming in. Benita, you got a job for me? Benita, you got a job for me? Benita. And I'm like, what can I do? You know. So what I decided, what I said, if I had the capital, what I would do was start a butcher training program, you know, and give those 22-year-olds, high school dropouts, and all those people an opportunity, because butchers make money, and that's where I am today, you know, trying to get some funds to set up a butcher training program to see what I could do about some jobs. Yeah.
Didn't you also have an experience where you did go to the bank and you tried to borrow money to get your butcher business started? Because as I understood it, the folks in your area were buying meat that was being shipped in from elsewhere.
Yes.
And so you had a business that could have been very successful and profitable there, but you weren't able to get the credit for it.
That's correct. When I began, well, we had a neighborhood grocery store, and senior citizens, you know, you have to run those accounts each month, and I noticed that you fixed income, and they would have to travel maybe about 10 miles to get meats, okay? And I'm thinking, wow, you paying somebody to go 10 miles to get some meat, you could be buying some meat with that money right there. So then I'm like, we need this, there's a need. I go to the bank, I get my proposals together, I go to the bank, and he says, well, Benita, not at this time. And I looked back at him, I said, well, if I build the building, will you mortgage it for me? Check with me. That's what he told me. I left determined that I was going to build a building. Now I got collateral. When I go back 2 years later, he tells me, I don't believe we want to do anything in that area, you know, so that was no again. So then I went to another bank, and what they told me was no. And I went to another bank, no. And said, I'm like, dog, that's a conspiracy against me. And I just thought it was just me. So when I read these stories, then I said, it happens all across America, the same way. Yeah.
Teresa Annis and her partner, Rebecca Heaton, own this company that is started with fire equipment, but detection equipment, but has gone to security cards and other things. And as I mentioned, they have some very good clients, Camden Yards. What is your circumstance today, and what are you encountering?
Well, we're not unique in that we've experienced the same things that these other ladies have. We own a business that I had worked for prior to purchasing it, and basically in November of 1995 went to every conventional bank in the city of Baltimore with a well-thought-out business plan, projecting out very conservatively over a 5-year period repayment of the loan, and was virtually turned down by every bank out there simply because the collateral that we had was contracts for maintenance and monitoring of these businesses that would have been assignable to the bank. But every answer we got from the bank was, well, we don't want to be in the alarm business, no thank you. Although they did tell me that they would be happy to take our deposits and come back and see us. So at which point the Empower Baltimore people, Diane Bell and Leslie Bender, directed us to the SBIC, which is a Small Business Investment Corporation, and we were able to get the funding just to do the acquisition. And it is very costly funding. So it's left us in a position where we have this company that's just bounding, but we don't have the capital and the things that we need to, put in new computer systems. We want to employ people and have a training program to bring people in. We're in a lovely little community in the zone, and train them from the ground up to what we need. But all that takes capital, and so once again, we have this great business, but we don't have the capital that we need to expand it in the areas that we do.
Diane, do you want to say a word about why you think there is this problem? I mean, this would appear to be a situation that's just ripe for a bank to help them grow.
But I think it is common across this country in terms of it is businesses that don't have a track record, businesses that have great ideas, but not necessarily in terms of sometimes credit history problems. One of the things that's happened in Baltimore in terms of the technical assistance that the First Lady asked about, that is what we do. We have a business empowerment center because we We know that sometimes it's also language barriers in terms of understanding what the banking world is looking for, the bank speak, all those issues. We play that role in terms of helping connect businesses, startup businesses, entrepreneurs to capital. But even with that, we've been very clear that with our success, we've created over 1,600 new jobs in Baltimore's empowerment zone since 18 months ago. Most of those new jobs are small businesses in the zone. As we look at that, though, we're seeing other small businesses, entrepreneurs come into our door that have not been able to get into the bank, that have not been able to get access to capital. Even as we're helping many, like Terry, get connected, there are a lot of other opportunities we know to grow business and grow the zone if we can find, and this offers us that access to capital. And we have a community that's very invested. The shareholder piece of this is critical in terms of the commitment to changing the community. We had a number of the residents, we have village centers in our zone that said, we need this tool because many times the banks are not going to be responsive. For whatever the reason, they're not willing to take that risk. So that they needed this tool to grow more businesses.
Well, you know, I'm reminded when my husband and I worked on the Good Faith Fund and the other related community banking efforts in Arkansas, I'll never forget one man, an older man, saying, you know, things have changed so much. He said, when I was starting out, I could go down to the bank, I could borrow $200 on my signature, and then I could go pay it back, then I could borrow $500 on my signature. He said, but my boy, because his son was trying to get into business, he goes now and they say, well, we don't give loans for that little amount of money. And, you know, we don't give you a loan on your signature anymore, even if we know you in the community. So that what used to exist was community banking. Right. And because of changes in the economy throughout the world, we have the absence of that kind of opportunity in a lot of places now. So really, what we're trying to do is recreate a pretty old-fashioned idea where people can be judged on their own merits as somebody in the community who can make a contribution. And I think that is really key, that this is not some new abstract idea, but it's really going back to the way things were in most places not so long ago.
Nor is it a necessarily riskier proposition.
Right. That's right.
Because they know the people, as you say, and the neighborhood. You will be setting up the bank that this funding makes possible? Will it be your organization that does it?
Yes, in fact, it will be our organization with the board of directors, we're very clear, will be the community residents.
Mm-hmm. And what would you likely do in a case like this? You don't have to make the loan here right now. But what criteria would you impose that would be different than what a bank would, the commercial bank has already said here?
Well, one of the pieces that we already have moved forward is that we're using some of the Title $20 as well to focus on micro enterprise. So we're going to be combining and leveraging that opportunity there and actually using some of the SBA guidelines, but paying attention to what banks can't pay attention to, and that is in the front end of this, the technical assistance piece. Okay. That's not something that a bank's going to have opportunity to do.
So that defines the community development part of the bank,
correct,
as opposed to a traditional bank. Wanda Woodward set up Handy Hands, which I described earlier as a residential and commercial cleaning company that had hard times. She took on partners and she is back in business, tight budget, but again, same problem, trying to expand, running into credit limits. Wanda, do you want to talk a little bit about what you're confronting?
And not unlike everyone else here that's in business, financing is a struggle. What you find is that you stifle your growth. Because you can't get the financing to expand, you reduce the amount of contracts that you go after, which slows your business development, it slows your growth. And so you wonder if this is going to change. And seeing and reading about this initiative, you realize that there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and so you have something to work towards. But for the period of time that we've looked for financing, we've looked at different types. I mean, people come to you and they tell you that Well, there's a new type of financing available, and it's called factoring, where you can take your contracts and folks will give you money based on the amount of contracts. But when you get to the institution that will do that, they say, well, is this for just a year? Well, no, that doesn't give you enough time to pay the loan back. So you get all of these roadblocks. So this type of initiative would pretty much eliminate that, and that's a good thing to see coming for small businesses.
I can imagine it's a kind of a catch-22. The bank says, we want to see your contracts and long-term contracts, but you can't land a contract without proving to the company that you have some capital, some staying power, and so you're trapped. You go on a contract-by-contract basis, and you clean office buildings and... Yes,
we clean office buildings. We were just awarded a contract for the Avenue Market, which is a new development in the Sandtown, Winchester community in Baltimore City. And, it's a market, a municipal market that's being managed by a private company. And so that was one of our largest contracts that we were awarded up to date. And it's great that we were able to get in there, but they wanted a community-based business cleaning that market. That's good.
Mr. Smith, earlier the First Lady spoke of the importance of the nation's capital, and you've been a long-time worker in the vineyards of the nation's capital and in its neighborhoods. And what is your sense of the connection between this kind of initiative, bringing capital, creating jobs, and the future of the District of Columbia? Can you speak to that?
Yes, well, I think as president of Marshall Heights Community Development Organization for 16 years, we have been about this kind of work as a part of our economic development and our housing development and community development work. So this fits in perfectly. This is an idea whose time has come. This would be the first community development bank in the District of Columbia, the nation's capital. We'll try to set a model, a role model for doing business. We'll be working with our CDC partners here, who many are here today, Bob Moore and others, the Board of Trade, working, leveraging, and networking to get people in and giving them technical assistance through our CDC network. And our CDCs do micro-lending, so we'll take care of the next level, working with them and leveraging this whole thing through. So it's really, we are working and we will be serving the CD area, the community development area, and the enterprise zone area, which is the same areas. 300,000 people, they have $3 billion in income, but have no way to get at access to credit to any great degree. Bank mergers are happening, which is shrinking the whole pool of money available. We're coming in, I think, at the right time, and we want to thank you and Andy Como and HUD and Roy and all for helping us get to this point, and my board members who have hung in there, John Hamilton and all of us, for the last 3 years trying to work toward this effort. So we think it's absolutely on time.
What kind of a scenario do you see for getting this set up?
We already have, we're an organization, we have our OCC, thanks to OCC to work with us, FDIC approval. We're just about ready to go. We hope to have our first office in the Nehemiah complex at 14th Street and what is it, about 14th and Belmont. Yeah. We hope to, that's the Columbia Heights development.
The traditional question is, when is the first loan likely to?
I would say probably 3 or 4 months after we get in organized. We have to search for a CEO.
I see.
We're going to be organizing that. And also Georgetown University is one of our major investors. They've committed $1 million. Nations Bank is working with us. We're going to be getting some participation, about $4 million, hopefully in participation loans to have our cash flow. And so we're going to network and kind of work this through. So as soon as we get our offices set up, I would say 6 months, probably.
Mr. Manning, the empowerment zone area that you work in, as I mentioned, is one of the poorest regions of America, literally. How do you see this initiative relating to an area like the Delta?
It's critical. Quite frankly, the comment that was made earlier by you, Mrs. Clinton, is that we're actually going back to community banking is where 10 years now, and have found that if we are truly going to empower people and families, that you cannot accomplish that without economic empowerment. And that means opportunities for everyone who wants a better life for their children. Being in the lending business from the public sector for a number of years, we have found that fixed asset lending and mortgage lending to some degree are problems, but they're not the problem. The problem has been for that individual who is going into business to get startup capital, or who is looking for working capital to service their contracts. That's where we have difficulty. When Andrew came and toured the 2nd District and we talked about that and he saw some of the situations, it became very, very clear to us that this is a key part of our puzzle. And what we are attempting to do is to use these funds, take that little bit of extra risk maybe others can't take, and then entice and pull in over time the banks comfortable doing those things without any question. We have a lot of problems, but at the same token, we like to think we have a whole lot of opportunities, and we are deeply, deeply grateful for this piece of the puzzle, I can assure you.
I think it's important, too, to stress the point that you're making about the startup and working capital, that these banks that are going to be set up, they are banks that expect people to pay loans back, to be good credit risks. I mean, this is not charity. This is not passing out money and hoping for the best with your fingers crossed. I mean, the way this is supposed to work is that what we're doing is to bring back banking to people who have been, for a lot of reasons, shut out of the banking market. And so everyone who is a prospective shareholder or loan applicant needs to know that this is still a bank, and it's going to operate like a bank, and it's going to get set up and function like you would expect a bank. But it's going to be a bank more like the ones we can recall of 20 or 30 years ago, where you knew the people who were there and you had a stake in the neighborhood, and people were, willing to take a little bit of risk because they'd go and eat the chicken wings. It wasn't some abstraction. So I think that that's important, that the message that this bank is sending out is that we think there are good credit risks in every neighborhood and county in America that right now can't get that startup and working capital. And so we want to be sure that people know that this is not some sort of feel-good charitable idea, that everybody's going to be expected to abide by banking rules, but they're going to be able to get in the door and have their risk assessed realistically.
Mrs. Clinton, to close out, before Eleanor Holmes Norton leaves, I see her getting up to go. Sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the spot. I wondered whether she and Andrew Cuomo both might have a word from the perspective looking at the district. We've been very active, HUD has, and the administration, on matters related to, for example, homelessness in the District of Columbia, public housing in the District of Columbia. Other departments have had other initiatives. Donna Shalelo's HHS has been very active on some of the hospital issues and many others. And how this fits into the bigger puzzle, I think, Eleanor, is something that you know a lot about. And then I'd like Andrew to mention something as well.
Well, first, let me say, as Henry prepares to leave office, that perhaps the first model for how a federal agency might relate to the nation's capital comes out of HUD, because Henry came and regarded the district immediately as the place to start a new approach to homelessness. And so as he leaves, I want you to know, out of that, I think, came really the notion in the administration of the President's task force on the district. It has done a lot of work that a lot of folks don't know about, because a lot of it is work that needs to be done with nuts and bolts behind the scene. I want to say how glad I am to see Carol Thompson-Cole here as well. But I can't tell you how much it means to the district to be the place where this starts, because it does send out the message that there is a priority and an understanding that the nation's capital needs special help and is the place to model many programs. And this is a city bursting with entrepreneurial spirit, not enough resources to get all of that entrepreneurial energy going, so that if you had to choose Mrs. Clinton, a program, you couldn't have chosen a better one to raise our morale, because it's not about attending to our problems. It's about rebuilding our city through the energy of our own residents. And I want to thank you for inaugurating this wonderful program here. And I can virtually guarantee you that every penny of it is going to be well used and paid back.
Thank you very much, Delegate. And
I think to echo what we've heard here today, so many of the problems we've worked on in the district, be it homelessness, the public housing problems that we've worked with the youth, we need a positive alternative to offer. We need something to say, here's the problem we're trying to address, here's the solution, here's the alternative path, here's the opportunity to create those jobs, to create the sense of positive alternatives for people. And I think this does that. This really brings the tools, the resources to the community, takes their dreams and visions, and says, we're going to work with you. If it's teaching you the language to talk to a bank, the technical assistance component, or getting into a business of making loans that maybe is smaller below the commercially accepted, or even going into areas that normally banks don't go into. A lot of the entrepreneurs who these institutions will finance haven't been able to get loans just because of the address they give on the form, and banks didn't want to go into those areas. So that capital access component, I think, really offers people a real opportunity, a real alternative to some of the things we're trying to turn them away from. And the stock ownership idea, where we can now say to the community, it's yours. The power is yours. The destiny is yours. Your future is yours. It's not a government in Washington, D.C. It's not even a local government, with all due respect. It's literally the people. They're literally vested in the solution. And whether it works out or it doesn't work out, it's up to them and no one else. That is a real precedent that I'm excited about. And I think when people know that it's up to them and the power is in their hands, they're a really unstoppable force, and it's going to be exciting to see.
Mrs. Clinton.
Oh, I'm just thrilled by all this because I want to be able to come back in a couple of years after you've been up and running. I want to be able to go to Baltimore. I want to come back to Mississippi and the Delta. And I want to see the same success stories that I've seen in villages outside Dhaka, Bangladesh, or in, a little shed in the middle of Managua, Nicaragua. I want to see and hear for myself how lives have been changed and communities have been rebuilt and hope has been reborn in places that others had given up on. And I absolutely think that will happen, and I really am very pleased that so many people in this community are willing to roll up their sleeves and get to work to create economic opportunity for themselves and their neighbors. So this couldn't be a better holiday present for this district and for all of us who care about it. So thank you very much.
I'm glad you brought up the holiday present note, because former First Ladies have brought turkey baskets to the district, and our First Lady's bringing a community development bank.
President Clinton and First